Welcome, everyone, to the first installment of Demo Days. I'm super pumped to be here. I'm Steve Taylor. I am the channel content producer here at Channel Program, and I'm joined by Ryan. I didn't ask you how to pronounce that. Ricciardi?
That's good enough. I'll take it.
All right. He's the senior vice president of something, sales probably, or
Partner success is the term that they're using for him.
Partner success. Yeah, sales.
Yeah, well, because it's post-sale. It's once you guys sign on, I'm responsible for the onboarding and the customer success team, sales engineers, and all those things.
Yeah. So some of you have joined with, unfortunately, the wrong link. I sent out the wrong link this morning, and then I sent out a correction. So if I kick you out, it's because you're backstage instead of in the audience, and I don't want you eating our donuts back there while we're presenting. So yeah, feel free to hop in using the correct link, and let's kind of dive in. Ryan, so I want to set the stage a little bit before we dive into a demo with SaaS Alerts. I want to talk about token theft and what's the other term? The hijacking term.
Browser hijacking, yeah.
It is just browser hijacking. Okay. So I want to talk about these a little bit because I'll be honest, cybersecurity was not really like a big to do when I was running my MSP, and I don't really understand how they work to understand the seriousness of them. So fill us in, please.
Sure. So for those of you guys who don't know what SaaS Alerts does, the name is really on the nose, but we exist as a company because we believe that the user is more important than the endpoint. And if we really want to protect our customers, we should focus on the users. They use the devices, not the other way around. And a big part of that is focusing on identity crime, identity-based attacks. So you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with the terms, or at least you've seen them in headlines, token theft and browser hijacking. They effectively allow someone to bypass conditional access and MFA in most SaaS applications by stealing an active token. So you've got an OAuth session. It's what allows you to jump from SharePoint to Teams, Teams to your email, email to your calendar, without having to re-authenticate every single time. So they're never going anywhere. They're necessary for day-to-day business, but they're also wildly abusable, and it doesn't take a whole lot of effort. So those are the two most prevalent sources of attacks. It's pretty much the next thing that happens after any successful phishing attack. Grab the token, authenticate from wherever you are, and your conditional access policies do nothing to stop it because they require a login event to fire. And there is no login event. As far as Microsoft is concerned or Google's concerned, you're already logged in, nothing to verify. That's the design.
All right. So I think you've got a couple slides you want to show us with some interesting facts that I still can't believe.
Yeah, it's a little bonkers. So, and there are URLs at the bottom if any of you guys want them and can't, type that fast. I'm happy to find a way to get Steve to share them. This is where I got this data. It's the Internet Crimes Division and the Fortune report for 2023. But what it really came down to is 62% of all successful reported cybercrimes were identity-based. Had nothing to do with the endpoint. The device you use doesn't matter. There was no malware installed. It was tricking a user. 98.6% of the threats that hit inboxes were email impersonation. You're somebody I know, I'm somebody you know, take my advice, let's do this thing. And 1.32% were malware. So it wasn't really people trying to get you to download stuff. It was just people trying to get you to authenticate that you are who they want to be, and they can take advantage of that. So with those, according to the IC3, the Internet Crime Division of the Department of Homeland Security, there were 21,832 reported business email compromises in their last report. $2.7 billion lost off of those. Now, for context, in that same time frame, in that same report, there was $34.3 million lost to ransomware. So it's pretty prevalent. It's obviously the direction people are going because it's a lot easier to hack a user than it is to hack a device.
So I think what I'm hearing then is if you're an MSP and you're still marketing and prospecting with let's just say FUD, for lack of a better term, fear, uncertainty, doubt about ransomware, it sounds like ransomware, like it's still a thing, but it's not the thing now. Is that
It's
right?
it's still a thing, and it's definitely not something you should ignore. But the MSP channel has done a really good job of securing against it. I mean, hell, just having immutable backups is a pretty good answer to ransomware on local devices. The problem is most of the data people rely on now is in SharePoint, and it's not necessarily that you have to remove access to that to scare someone. You just have to also have a copy because that flies in the face of compliance. It shakes confidence with your customers if somebody's got access to your data. So they've just pivoted. You guys started locking stuff down on the ransomware side and local devices. So they went to the next easy place to go.
Okay.
I mean, we have SaaS Alerts data that kind of backs that up as well. It's a little closer to home and MSP specific. We had 924 MSPs on the platform through 2023, and we automatically remediated over 7,100 email compromises. So that's about a little bit more than one per month per MSP that we protected. And in that time frame, our partners found reason 680,000 times to retire active risky OAuth sessions. So what I mean by that is guest users with access they shouldn't have had, folks that have been logged into a tenant for months without ever having to re-verify that those were legitimate tokens, cleaning up unused licenses, breaking a shared mailbox OAuth. So you fire somebody, you turn them to a shared mailbox, they're still logged in. Unless you go in and break that connection and block sign-in, that person you fired can still access the data inside of that mailbox. So lots of reasons to focus on protecting against OAuth.
Wow. Okay. I think those were the only two slides, right?
So there's that one more. We were talking a
Oh,
little bit about the ZTNA model, the conditional access model, and
that's right.
ATP. And this is not meant by any means to be fear, uncertainty, and doubt. To your point, it's just the fact. If your answer right now to token theft or browser hijacking is I have conditional access policies, geofencing in place, I'm using a ZTNA strategy, zero trust networking access, where they have to have my agent installed on their device to get to the cloud provider because it's routing through specific IPs. Those don't work in this scenario. So if you're okay with it, I'll show that one last slide and
Absolutely,
kind of
yeah.
walk them through it. Is it still up there? Because it
Yep.
looks like there we go. Okay. So there's a lot going on in here, but this should be somewhat common knowledge. I just want to make sure we reiterate that little green bar that I put there. That is what conditional access policies in ZTNA ensures happens without the attacker. It's just basically the user gets to the thing that you want them to, and no one else does, which is great. But in the token theft scenario, it doesn't stop anything because ZTNA relies on the conditional access policies configured inside of the SaaS application. So in the scenario where an attacker gets a phishing email through advanced threat protocols, ATP, which happens all the time, the user that clicks on it does have your agent. They're the ones that fall for that adversary in the middle thing and enter their creds and then get routed to the legitimate website. All of that will go seamlessly. That part where the credentials and tokens are compromised will also go seamlessly. And that attacker replaying the session token will also go seamlessly because conditional access and MFA has already been bypassed. So I'm not telling you that you shouldn't configure conditional access policies. I'm not telling you that zero trust networking access solutions aren't a great thing to implement. I'm just saying, in the case of identity theft, by browser hijacking and token theft, which are very, very prevalent today, it doesn't do anything. So I want to make sure people are aware that there might be a blind spot in their infrastructure if that's what they're relying on to secure Microsoft 365 exclusively.
All
That's
right. That I'll be honest. The ZTNA thing, like I I thought zero trust was like I thought that was just like the end all be all. It's zero trust, right? So
there's the wording networking, zero trust networking access. It is the end all be all for not getting or allowing access to network infrastructure, network shares and drives. It wasn't really built or designed in the beginning to be a response to SaaS applications. I used to I was in the Marine Corps. I had a B billet in network administration. And then after that, I worked for the Federal Aviation Administration in safety and operational standards. And they were deeply zero trust and it was flawless. But everything was housed in house, it was all local infrastructure. It doesn't track if you're going to store data in a third party cloud provider, which everyone does now.
gotcha.
Still valuable, very valuable, just not for this one scenario.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, now that we've set the stage, let's hop into a demo. So what just to give everyone an idea of what we're gonna do here. I asked Ryan to first give us like a high level overview of SaaS alerts, which we've done, and then I want to basically set up SaaS alerts. I'm going to use that overused phrase from the ground up. I want to I want to set up SaaS alerts, kind of like a first time MSP might. So
Perfect.
we'll show what it's like to maybe add a couple client environments. We'll show what it's like to set up some of these templates, and we'll just go through the motions of setting it all up.
Cool. You stay engaged with me though, because this isn't fun if it's just me talking. Okay.
I'm if there's one thing I'm good at, it's talking.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to share again, and we'll do this. So I do, if we have time at the end, in case you guys decide that SaaS Alerts is not for you, there are a couple of things that you can do without us, and remind me, Steve, I'd like to go through that as well.
Mhm.
But we'll start here. And if you were to sign up for SaaS Alerts and register, this is the page that you would land on in the beginning. So let me know when this is up and functional. Okay. So this is the page that you would hit as soon as you sign up. So you can OAuth in using Microsoft or Google. You can still use SMS. We actually just released a phone app for both iOS and Android that you'll be able to use push notifications and stuff on your phone as well. But ultimately, when you're initially configuring us, you'll land on this page. So Steve, we're going to go ahead and do what you said. We're going to go into the org tab and we're going to add a new customer here. It's very straightforward, and there's a couple of important points to note. I'm going to name it. We're the MSP admin. This makes the assumption that you guys have the credentials, the global administrator credentials to work with the client. If you don't, you can go by org admin, which effectively generates a link which will forward their OAuth over to them, and then they can authenticate on your behalf. We do not store admin credentials. We encourage you guys to make sure you're doing it securely, of course. But we do install an enterprise app in M365, and we're primarily API based for most of the other ones. You can always break the connections. But once you're in there, we have role-based access control if you want to use it, which means you can allow some of your customers in co-managed environments to see the alerts that are coming in, but not influence the actual environment. Once you've got that set, we require you to at least name the country from where you expect most of the folks to register and be signing in. If you want to lock it down because you are doing the ZTNA thing to IP ranges, you can absolutely do that as well or instead. And then you want to tell us if you're going to ticket this into your PSA. So we actually work with most of the PSAs, and I'll put something up later to show you who we've got integrations with. And then you hit next. And then this is a list of all of the things that we currently integrate with. So you'll notice there's a whole bunch of MSP tools on there. If you're a SaaS Alerts partner, we will monitor your MSP tools as part of the package, and we don't bill per user for that. It's just something that you get because you guys are a risk vector. If you're not monitoring and protecting your tools properly, at some point, and I think we can all harken back the last couple of years and think of a couple of examples, those tools can be used against you. So you would go in effectively and pick what you want to link to the customer that you're working with. You'll notice if I click this one, it's going to pop out into an OAuth window that is specifically Microsoft. It's not something SaaS Alerts routed through. So this is Microsoft's OAuth. It's going to do it twice, once for Graph API and once for the Entra API and installation of that enterprise app. And once you go through it, you'll see a little check mark pop up over Microsoft. I'm not going to go through it. But once that's done, back on the organization tab, you'll see the thing come up and you'll see users start to populate and data start to flow. That's the entirety of the onboarding process to start ingesting data for a client. If you do go in and do one and you forget to do another one, you can always go back in, hit add applications, and go back through that process to connect their Slack, their Dropbox, their Salesforce, whatever it is you want to monitor. Of note, like I said in the beginning, we believe the user is more important than the endpoint. Same is true for their applications. We bill per user. So if you've got somebody authenticating into 5 different applications using the same email address, that's still one user you're paying for, not 5 different accounts. Kind of a nice thought. So once you've got that done, we start ingesting alerts. We break these into 3 categories: critical, medium, and low. And you can customize those for what you care about. But effectively, we give you the ability to see kind of at a glance, very quickly, the behavior that we're detecting that might warrant your attention. The typical onboarding process, we'll set this up, we'll have it run, we won't connect it to a PSA, and we'll just ingest data for 3 or 4 days. And then one of my sales engineers and onboarding specialists will join and kind of advise on best practices based on what we're seeing. So one of the things that comes up quite often is, hey, look, most of this company that I just put in is in the States, but they have a VCIO in Canada. So once we start to detect those things, we do give you the ability to whitelist on the users. So you can say, hey, yes, 99% are in the United States, but this guy's going to be signing in from the United Kingdom, and he sometimes visits the States. That will overrule the company one. So if you set something like Singapore for this guy, and he jumps over and logs in from the States, we're going to trigger a critical alert. And if you have a set to, we'll automatically retire his sessions and block sign in because you didn't give him permission to sign in from that area. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of pieces after this. One of my guys thinks he's clever. He threw Antarctica in there.
Now this is stuff you can set up through Microsoft 365.
It is, but again, it's only off of the logins. So Microsoft's setup in geofencing requires a conditional access geofencing. It verifies it after the login. To drive that home a little bit further, you guys know conditional access happens after a successful OAuth has occurred. It basically says, hey, do you know the login? Do you know the password? Okay, now we've confirmed that and possibly the FA method. Are there any conditional access policies that would stop you from doing what you're trying to do? So in the event there's an attacker involved, what a conditional access policy has just done is said, you know the login, you know the password, you cannot do what you're trying to do right now. You with me on that, Steve?
Yes.
So we're taking more of a trust no one than a you tell us not to who to trust is Microsoft's. Ours is more about we're not going to trust anybody unless you tell us to. So we don't wait for a login event to do it. You can kick somebody out of the platform because they created an email forwarding rule, or they downloaded a document, or they deleted something, or they disabled MFA. A WCSS shell event, you can kick somebody out because they jumped from Teams to SharePoint and their IP range changed. We're letting you take control of those things well outside of just at the login.
Very
and that's
cool.
important because if you guys have listened to any of the conversations about kill chains and IOCs and things that happen right at boom, those are usually the indicators. A login event from outside an approved location, while it's an anomaly, it could be somebody on vacation, it could be a VPN, it could be just a cell tower jump. If you've got folks in Detroit, I'm pretty sure they ping Canada all the time. So it's the next step in the kill chain that you might want to respond to. And that's where actually a part of this comes into play. Respond. So respond is our engine that allows you to specify when to react to certain things. So as an example, let's call this risky behavior OAL, outside an approved location. So we can tell SaaS Alerts in the event for Microsoft, for anyone that I do business with, if they do the following things, I want an action taken. So let's start with outside of approved location. So they signed in from somewhere I didn't expect them to. You'll get an alert that happened on its own. And they enabled an email forwarding rule. Those are the first two things they did. Not just one, but both of those things happened. You can even get a little bit more granular and say they did it, and our platform Unify, we don't recognize the device they did it from. So Unify allows you to correlate RMM data from your devices to the cloud applications and actually say, hey, that laptop belongs to Steve. So anything that Steve does from that laptop, I know it's him. But if Steve tries to do something like this from a laptop that isn't his, different activity altogether. So you can build a rule that says if you're outside an approved location, you're creating email forwarding rules, and this device is not mapped to you, then I automatically want to expire that login, block future sign-in, and send a ticket to my PSA. It's the antivirus approach to business email compromise.
That makes perfect sense. Now, do you have this type of stuff set up as like templates somewhere?
We do. So I'll go back to rules here. Let's get rid of this. Yes, we're going to save it as a draft. Actually, we're going to leave. Rule templates are here. Now, the cool part, we're very proud of this. A lot of these you'll see have little parentheses, and I know this is kind of small on my screen. Ben Jones, Central Tech, these are members of our community that implemented these rules and then came back to us and said, hey, this one saved our bacon. Those 7,100 that I mentioned in 2023, a lot of them came from recommendations from our partners. So we vet them. They come to us and say, we've used this. It stopped a bunch of stuff for us. We vet them, make sure there's nothing that could go wrong with the rule, and then we template them out. So if you wanted to say, hey, I like this brute force attack, basically looks for a whole bunch of authentication failures followed by a successful login in an unapproved location, or multiple authentication failures in a shorter time frame, like spray attack, followed by a successful login. If you like it, you can just duplicate it, and we'll pop it into your tenant, and then you plug in your criteria.
That's fantastic. That makes it that makes it easy for MSPs of all skill levels. And look, there's no shame in admitting that maybe you're not as well versed with cybersecurity as some of the other guys out there. So this makes it so, I wouldn't say it's a level playing field, but it makes it a little more, I don't know, more gooder.
Yeah. Well, so you can see some of the names in there, like Jake Turan, logically.
Mhm.
There's rules in there that were built by VC3. There are rules that are built in here by, the big guys, the big
Yeah.
MSPs that have been around for a minute and venture backed. So yeah, you get to use what they've determined is in the best interest of their partners. A couple of these in here, I think, if I don't want to say his name without pointing it out. DJ from SpearTip being an enterprise level SOC MDR and XDR provider.
Mhm.
They leverage SaaS Alerts for their business email compromise response because what we do isn't easy, and it's, instead of trying to build their own, they just leveraged one that worked. So yeah, you're right. It does bring a level of security that might be a little harder to obtain if you don't have E5 across the board and a dedicated SOC in-house to your MSP.
Okay. I'm digging this.
Okay, I'm not. But wait, there's more. If I can 1990s 2 a.m. webinar this.
Okay. You're
All
gonna
right.
Steve Jobs me, but there's one more thing.
There's one more thing. Yeah, so I mentioned the Unify thing, so I kind of already covered that bit, but Unify is the one that allows you to automatically map devices that you are aware of. So if you let us monitor the RMM for your customers, not just the MSP, you go in and say, hey, I have VSA or Datto's RMM on all of these clients. We will actually look for correlation, like, hey, this guy, every time he signs in, has been from this device. It has your RMM agent on it. We have a 90% confidence this device belongs to this user. If you let us do that, then you can actually start filtering alerts out based on whether or not the device is mapped. And you can have multiple devices mapped to a person. I travel a ton. Steve, you and I were talking about that backstage.
Mhm.
I have this laptop that we're talking on, and I have an exact copy of one that I travel with. And then I have this phone. I'm a Samsung guy. If you ever saw me signing in from an Apple, it's not. So they're all mapped to me. And anywhere I go and pretty much anything I do is fine. It gets logged in SaaS Alerts, and we keep the logs for a year. But if it's on these devices, my techs assume it's me. If I try to sign into any of our systems without that stuff, I'll get booted immediately because I never use anything outside of that stuff. So it's a more effective cloud version of zero trust network access than actually ZTNA. Restrict it down to the user and their device together. And if they find a way around that, then that user's probably got bigger problems because they're tied up in somebody's basement.
All right. Now
Then,
we're also able to use SaaS alerts for way more than just um, the phishing and all this stuff that you've shown us.
yes, let's talk about baselining security. Which, if you guys are familiar with like SIP, which is an awesome tool, we wanted to bring something like that into the SaaS Alerts platform that's focused on the security aspect. So CIPP, SIP, however you said. What we did is we built an organizational vulnerability assessment report that pulls in the information from Microsoft, and very soon we'll do it from Google and all the other SaaS applications that we monitor, and tells you what their secure score is currently, what their license levels are currently, and how many more points you could potentially add to their score without them spending any more money. So right now, this shows you that this guy, they're at a 48%, which is a little bit above the average, which is around 42% that we've seen. But because they already have P1 and P2 licensing, so they have the access to both of those things, realistically, you could get them another 37.9% of a secure score if they're open to the suggested changes. And
That's
then
a
we'll actually
big
break
jump.
down what the suggested changes are. Like, hey, let's turn on the anti-phishing policy thing, move the threshold up to aggressive. Let's do these things, and if you let me, I can get you 20% more secure. So this report is a really good way to walk into either a prospect or a client who you're doing break fix for, but they're on the managed model, and say, listen, with what you've got, I can help you a lot. Or if their licensing is kind of crappy and you want to convince them to move up from business basic to business premium with P1, we'll show you with an additional license, we could also get you this. So we can help you upsell.
Can I go on a little tangent journey for a moment?
Please.
I think one of the things that separates um, value with MSPs, one of the things that separates a good MSP from a great MSP is simply communication. A good MSP is using SaaS alerts, and it'll see all these recommendations, and it'll implement them. And they're a good MSP because they've implemented all the changes. But what they haven't done is they haven't communicated with that client and gotten buy-in. So now when the client starts having, uh, let's just say, issues, for lack of better term.
Right. Why can't my guests get into my Teams meeting? Oh, because we disabled non-account access. Right.
Exactly. So now the client is going to start running into walls. They're going to start noticing friction in all of their cloud accounts that you're managing through SaaS alerts. A great MSP is going to sit down with the client and say, "Hey, I would like to make all of these changes to improve your score, your cybersecurity posture. Which of these do you think are like, let's not do this for any reason? Which ones do you have concerns with?" And go through them and just talk about them, man. Like you said, not allowing guests into a Teams meeting, like that would probably be a big red flag for people that do a lot of virtual
Right.
meetings.
Yeah, and
But
then you have to have that conversation. It's at the very least, it's an education moment. Like, okay, well, be really careful if you're sharing documents in the chat during these meetings because that's an anonymous file share and I can't get that back. But you at least open the line of communication and get to educate, if not actually make the change.
mhm.
I totally agree. There's another piece to this that I think that is critically valuable, and that is Microsoft's licensing model is very, very handy for Microsoft. For MSPs, it kind of sucks because it removes your ability to add a lot of margin in there when you can go Google and find out how much the license cost was. So let's say because you're buying them in bulk, you get like a 14% discount or somewhere around there. Realistically, like any margin over that, you've got to be able to demonstrate the value you're bringing. So what are you doing on top of that? Because I could just go buy it from one of 500 CSPs. So reports like this, anything that you can explain to the customer what you're doing for them is exceptionally valuable. And there's a piece to this report that's not exceptionally obvious right now, but the difference between a Fortify score and a Microsoft Secure score and all of this stuff actually becomes very evident. If you leverage something like Okta or Duo, Microsoft's not going to give you a secure score points for 2FA. They're not, because you didn't do it through them. So in this, you can actually go mark something as having an alternative mitigation method and note what you use in its place. And the Fortify score will actually give you the points. So you can say, hey, if you were going directly through Microsoft, you'd be less than 50% secure. But because of the things that you leverage me for, maybe I use Bullfish or whatever you use for anti-phishing, because I'm using that and because I'm using Duo and because I'm using all these things, you're actually at like a 74%. So if you weren't with me, you'd be down here. But these are all the extra things that I do for you. So it becomes a very valuable tool for stickiness.
Now, does the Fortify score yet give you points for things that you're doing in other platforms entirely, like Slack or Dropbox?
So right now, no. That's the ultimate goal of it. Is it's going to be more of a SaaS secure score where you're saying, hey, across all of these things that you're using, I'm doing these things for you, and that's why you're sitting where you are. Right now, off the data that we've got from the guys that have used it, it's been almost exclusively Microsoft. So we're still kind of fine tuning where those percentages be. But now that report is one part of Fortify. The report actually tells you what you can do, but then the logical next step is great. Now they said yes to all this stuff. I have to go do it. And we tried to simplify that for you as well. Inside of Fortify, you can go in and say, hey, Daily News said yes to me turning on the phishing policy collection, which is these seven steps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally you'd go into their tenant and you'd go spend an hour or two configuring all these things for those guys. You can just come in here and say, hey, we're going to apply this. We're going to hit next and apply those actions. And SaaS will do it. We'll configure the ATP pieces and the conditional access policy pieces for this specific set. And then on top of it, and to my point, because you don't want to just rely solely on ATP and conditional access, we will monitor for drift and anomalies outside of these rules. So the best, simplest example that I can give you guys is with MFA. There's a force MFA option in here. So if, let's say one of your clients has 30 users in it and you enforce MFA and you get it all set up and they're good to go. And then they hire a new guy. And that new guy gets the enforcement thing, but he never sets up his secondary method. You'll actually get an alert, a ticket, and you'll see this will change to regressed because you're no longer in compliance with that because you do not have it enforced across the entire group. We will let you know when things change. If somebody adds a SharePoint library and you had some DLP settings, but you don't have them for that library, we'll show you a regression because it's not accurate across the entire org. So we help you make sure that what you set in place stays in place. And then in the event that somebody does find a way around it, like falls for a phishing email, we have an automatic reaction to respond to that and take care of it.
Now, this is obviously a really amazingly powerful tool if you're able to check some boxes and have SaaS Alerts automatically configure a whole bunch of stuff for you inside Microsoft 365. But one of the things that I heard is that, let's say, an MSP decides they want to take their ball and go home. When they disengage that client from SaaS Alerts, it like undoes all those changes. Is that true?
You didn't just hear that. We are a little bit torn on how to word this in the platform. We do actually have something when you initially connect Fortify that says, hey, if you disconnect Fortify, you'll lose these changes. And we might need to word that better. The answer is no, it's not true. We won't remove them. What we are trying to get across is all of that regression stuff that I mentioned and all that ability to force the changes when things go on inside of the tenant, you'll lose it. So we can't guarantee that you're going to maintain MFA enforcement across the entire thing if you take Fortify off. You might lose the stuff that you did, and there's no way that we can help you or alert you to it. So it's basically our legalese of saying, if you take it off, it's not our fault. Like we can't monitor anymore.
Got it.
But it won't go roll back the changes to answer your questions.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic news. Now, we talked about using SaaS Alerts to edit the Microsoft 365 configuration. We talked about using SaaS Alerts to monitor for anomalies in user behavior. One of the things that we did not really talk too much about is how SaaS Alerts leverages the MSP tools like our RMM or PSA to correlate that information. I know we talked about it a little bit with Unify, but can we touch on that deeper?
Yeah, so there's actually a bunch of pieces to that. And so there's actually two talk tracks we can go down with this. With the MSP tool things, there's an obvious benefit for you guys of securing tools like IT Glue and your RMM. IT Glue having the keys to the kingdom in it because it's the best documentation platform really out there at the moment, is a necessity, and it's very, very valuable. Any documentation platform is, but it needs to be monitored. It needs to be secured. So we monitor those things so we can see the who, what, when, and where's. Who's signing into it? What are they doing when they're in there? How long are they in there? Is it a weird time for them to be in there? All of those things. So with IT Glue as the first example, if someone touches a runbook, we'll log it. If somebody deletes a runbook, we'll alert you. If somebody touches a password, we'll log it. If somebody touches 50 passwords in 5 seconds, we're going to alert you. If one of your technicians is signed in from, let's say he's in Chicago on his M365, but he's in LA on IT Glue, we're going to alert you. Like, that's weird. That's not how this should work. And he really shouldn't be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, we're correlating this data with IP providers outside of the application. So we can tell you things like, this is a VPN that he's on, or this is a known bogon. It says that it's from the States, but we can't confirm that. They're using a Tor browser. It's a known anonymous browser. This IP address has been used in an attack before. We provide all of that information. So you're not relying solely on what you're getting from the SaaS application. You can compare it to the information you've got from the 2 million users that we're monitoring right now. So that's exceedingly handy. And then the other part is like you said, the RMM. So for your end users, the RMM data from their device across and then their Salesforce, their Slack, and their Dropbox, if those things aren't matching up, we can show you that. We can actually give you a list of like, these are all the things that have occurred. We even have reports built for that. We have an account detail report. If you think somebody's been up to something weird, or maybe somebody just quit and one of your end users wants to know like, hey, what were they up to right before they left? You can pull a report and we'll show you everywhere they've signed in from, when they were signed in, what they're still signed into, what documents they've touched, downloaded, deleted, uploaded, etc. So that you've got a real like long tail that you can follow to help them diagnose what may have been an issue.
That's awesome.
And then there's all the other little bits for the RMM, which is exceptionally valuable. If somebody runs a script, like creates a script and runs a script immediately, that's a critical alert to us because it shouldn't happen one after the other. There should be some testing. There should be some security of that. If somebody disables MFA, technician MFA disablement, we'll alert you to those things as well. And you can actually still use respond. We won't write back into the RMM. That's just a little too dangerous. But you can build respond rules to alert based on a series of criteria. Like if somebody does go into the RMM and modify somebody, and then right after that they make another step, we can have a critical alert fired to somebody's cell phone, just so you can call them like, what are you doing? That's not how that works. So you can get real creative in making sure that you see only what you want to see when you need to see it.
I'm impressed. I mean, I've always been impressed. I've interviewed Jim a few times, Jim Lippy, your CEO, and I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing over at SaaS Alerts. If I was running an MSP today, this would definitely be a must-have solution for all of my clients. One of the things that we didn't touch on is reporting of trends and risks. And while you're bringing that up, for those of you in attendance, if you have questions, even tough questions, put them in the chat, and let's get them out there.
That's actually my favorite part. I do hope you guys engage with us while we're here. If there's any chance that there's something that we need to know, if there's a question or a comment or a complaint about something that we're doing, I would be more than happy to answer it. I would rather there not be any miscommunication or lack thereof, or lack of communication, excuse me. So please, by all means, guys, ask me anything.
And I just realized on our chat was disabled, so I went ahead and enabled that just now.
Oh, that's gonna be very good. Okay, good. So we'll dig into the reports. So one of the things that you land on, let me get this back up here. When you first come in, is a risk dashboard. I personally think this is more for the MSP's use. And we have actually broken out the reporting modules. Is this coming up? Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. We have broken out the reporting module from the actual SaaS Alerts tenant, because reports is designed for you to be able to sit there and walk through it with a customer. My favorite one for the first intro, outside of the organizational vulnerability assessment, which I showed in the beginning, is the cyber assessment. Because if you just go with a risk report, it's going to kind of seem like you're only showing them all these terrible things that happen and not just the day-to-day. So it becomes a little alarmist. Please keep in mind this is a demo environment. If you guys have ever seen our SASE report, typically about 1% of all of the alerts that we get are critical. If you ever had 11,968 critical alerts in a month, the world's on fire. But this is where we test literally everything. So normally for 19,892 logged events, you'd see somewhere in the range of like 190 critical alerts. And those things will vary from mass file touches to MFA failures, different than multiple authentication failures in a row, like MFA failures, which means somebody doesn't know the login and the password, they're hitting the MFA thing. That just means that you need to go tell that person they need to reset their password everywhere because it's known if they're using it in more than one spot. But this one gives you, hey, here's what a month in your business looks like. 19,000 different people, there were 19,000 login events. People were, logging in. People were moving around from Teams to SharePoint. People were linking to foreign applications, downloading stuff, uploading stuff. These are all of the things that occur for your company. And if you want to sit there and monitor them, fine, but that's 20,000 things you got to look at a month. Or we can do it for you. We can secure these things, and we can knock this down to just the things that warrant your attention. During this time frame, again, automated testing, because this is a demo environment, fat finger their password 521 times. Or possibly they're being the victim of a spray attack. Somebody is very, very desperately trying to get into that account. You can start to educate people based on this information, saying, look, we're seeing the most alerts from these guys. Do they have any escalated access that we should be worried about? Do they have MFA enabled? And we have a report for that as well. Login activity. You can kind of guess when the weekends are off of this report. Now, one of the things of note, you can change the color schemes of these things, is during long weekends and over holidays like 4th of July and Christmas, we tend to see the failure spike up over the successes. And I'm sure you guys can guess why. There's fewer eyes on glass. That's when the attackers attempt things. So anytime we see that, we tend to make sure people have more aggressive respond rules turned on, because you can schedule those to run for X amount of days or whatever. And then unapproved logins. Who's actually going places they're not supposed to? Do we need to tune out our alerts because they actually live there? Or is there somebody potentially in the middle of a breach? And where are we seeing them from? So New York City, again, we're testing. It'd be really weird if that was the case, but Kiev, Patna, Bocha, if you guys have a US-based company and you're seeing those names in the login lists, it's going to warrant your attention. And then this one's kind of overlooked, but I think wildly valuable. Externally shared file events. If they can't give you a real justification for why they have anonymous, you see that second one, anonymous file shares externally, you should disable it. It should be disabled in general, but we've seen it more often than not, it isn't. And the reason I say it's important is because this isn't that you can share it to anyone you want to, it's that you don't have to say who you are when you share it. So you can go into an externally shared file report and see shared by anonymous, here's the file that was shared, and it never expires. That means somebody with access to the environment grabbed something. We don't know what's in it because we don't actually read email or read documents. We just see the titles, and just shared it out. And anybody who has that link can now open it, and we can never get it back. So it's a very good educational bit to go to people and say, hey, are you okay with people blindly sharing things out of your SharePoint? If you're not, we should go back into Fortify and we should enable the rule that disables anonymous file sharing. You have to be signed in. I have to know who you are before you go take files from my company and give them to somebody else, at least a level of accountability. That one's good. It's a good one. You can schedule these. It's a good one to schedule out. If you guys do QBRs, maybe schedule it to go to whoever's going to initiate the QBR a week prior, so you can do some analysis of what's been going on with the client and just seem like you're paying attention and you're aware of what's up, and you can maybe address some of the issues before you get on the phone with them. There's another one that I think is quite handy, kind of without saying, MFA settings report for Microsoft. And I haven't done this one on this guy in a while. Let's see if anything's changed. Where you can actually see who's got MFA enabled and who's got self-service password reset enabled. Scariest thing for me in this report is anyone who's got MFA off and SSPR on. If you see that, you're effectively saying, I don't need you to confirm who you are before you reset your password, and that terrifies me. That means, like, if their Yahoo is their secondary authentication method and that gets breached, they can do a password reset of your instance and get it. So this is another really good one to show to people and say, hey, we can't have this. We can't have MFA off and still allow you guys to reset your own passwords. It's just a security breach that I don't have control over, and I'm not comfortable with that.
That makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned being able to turn off anonymous in SharePoint and OneDrive, anonymous link stuff.
File sharing,
So yes, thank you. Sorry, words are hard. How do we do that real quick with SaaS Alerts?
It's part of one of the Fortify things. When we was going in here and we were talking through the best efforts for securing things, it's part of, I have to dig it. I think it's actually in this one. Yeah, so it's part of the attachment one. You have the ability to go in and specify rules on, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, honestly, but go in and just say, hey, like, you have to be signed in to do these things. However, this is to the point that we talked about earlier. It's also one of the ones that you get when you block guest accounts out of going into Teams and things like that. You do want to communicate with a partner before you do it and convey the value.
Gotcha. Ben Jones has been killing it in the chat with answering a bunch of questions. I'm still going to put the questions up for you to answer for the people that are listening and not watching?
Oh, this is like double Jeopardy-ish because if Ben said something different than I did, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
I can't
What's
wait.
the minimum quantity to purchase?
So the minimum offer that we have to manage a tenant, so effectively to get a tenant spun up in your name, includes 500 licenses.
Okay. And what if I'm a little MSP with like 50?
So we've got a couple of things that we've been trying to work on. One is we build a bunch of strategic partnerships with some other folks that are also a channel program that don't have minimums. So if you're trying to get your foot into managing these things and you don't quite have the user count yet, we've got partners in Blockworks and Highwire and Solutions Granted and SpearTip and FutureSafe by SPP and TechTribe that all sell our product and don't have minimums. So I'd encourage you to consider those methods. Or we've been pretty flexible with helping build ramps and do some creative things to get you off the ground first. Keeping in mind that there's a bunch of value solely in the MSP tools, we do believe that our price point is valuable if you're just doing this for your MSP alone. But we wanted to include 500 users because we want to encourage you guys to put it on your customers.
What do you charge per user for 500?
So on the high end, it's $1.50, and this should segue into your other question that you thought might be awkward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So $1.50, and that's with a month to month or with a 1 year?
It's a 1 year. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't have month to month.
Okay. Now, you're right. I did have another question, another tough question. I heard rumblings that you guys are going to be switching to 3-year agreements.
Yes, and that was on Reddit.
Mm-hmm. Gotta love Reddit.
That SaaS Alerts is forcing 3-year contracts. We're not. So what we did in the very beginning to avoid the stink of the 3-year contract, because I know it's a sticking point for a lot of MSPs, we didn't offer one at all. But we got asked repeatedly if we would co-term SaaS Alerts agreements to RMM agreements. Like, hey, my ConnectWise agreements go through 2026. Can I just do the same with you since you're going to monitor them? And our initial answer was no, but I can send you an email committing that your price won't go up. That's the best I can do. It's like the 12th or 13th time we got asked that. We're like, let's just build a 3-year contract. It made sense for us to like know we're going to have the customer for 3 years. And yeah, so we incentivized on it, but there will never be, and there isn't currently, a requirement to sign for a multi-year.
Perfect. Are there any licensing requirements on the Microsoft side?
That's actually one of the things that makes us really cool. We will work with everything from business basic up. So one of the things to keep in mind is you do have to have access to the admin console to use us. So if they're buying it through like GoDaddy or something, we can't help. But pretty much everything I showed, short of the MFA stuff, you can get with any business basic license or up. Business premium includes P1, gives us the ability to do the Fortify stuff and to give you MFA information and enforce MFA and things like that.
And Ben added that he heard Microsoft is removing that P1 requirement soon.
So yes, I heard that too, and it was right about that instance where one of their internal security things got breached. I think it was somebody figured out an OAuth token from one of their folks, and there was, if you didn't have the right licensing, you didn't have access to the logs long enough to go back and see if it impacted you. So they made a few promises. They were going to extend the length of the logs they keep from 30 days or 60 to 180, and they were going to dump the P1 requirement for MFA. If they've done it yet, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure Microsoft will always do exactly what they say when they say it. So it'll happen.
Sure. Now, I know you showed us like the abridged version of getting things set up, and you were able to do all of that in, we'll call it 15, 20 minutes. How long does it really take to go from like zero, I just signed up, to deployed?
Great question, Matt. The answer is it takes about 2 weeks across the 3 hours of meetings. The first hour is going to be with somebody like Ben. That'll be the initial sign up, setup, confirmation that you're an MSP because we only sell to the channel. So we actually have a little bit of a process to make sure you're a registered MSP, and then to connect your organizations. You get your orgs connected, you get your PSA turned on in that first hour, and then you just pull logs. You don't do anything with it. We just let it pull for 5 or 6 days. Hop back on the phone, spend another hour with Anthony or Ben or Dana, and actually kind of tune down your alerts that you don't want, tune up the ones that are important to you, and build your responses. let it run fully configured for another week, and then we'll meet you one last time to see if there's any outliers or things that we didn't have set up right. You give us the yes, this is the way I needed it, I'm getting the information I want, and then we hand you off to a customer success manager and you go. So 3 hours of your time over about a 2-week time frame.
And the only reason that you're saying over a 2-week time frame is not because you guys just want to drag your feet. It's because you want to make sure that SaaS Alerts has enough log data pulled in, so that way
Yeah.
you can start correlating what you're seeing in the logs and making sure that some of these templates or policies that you want to put in place aren't going to screw something up.
Right. It's the equivalent for those of you guys who have ever done a SOC audit. SOC 1 is a place and time. This is what works right now, and this is what we say we're going to do. And SOC 2 is prove that you can do it over a time frame, and you've made the adjustments you have to. So we do it over 2 weeks, so we can hopefully see all of the normal behavior that you would see over a couple of weekends, over a couple of work days, when somebody travels. Like, let's get enough data to make sure we're configured to respond to what you would normally see occur, if it's good or bad. So that's the reason for that, is we need more information to say that we've got a good go forward strategy with you. And this is our onboarding is compulsory, so it's not one of those things where you have to opt in and we'll find a time for you. We want to make sure you're configured from the beginning. This strategy has worked so well, honestly, that at this point we've reached a level where my boss Jim has started making guarantees about revenue generation for the MSPs that go through our methodology. Like he literally started telling people at SchnitzFest a week or two ago that if they do what we suggest and they get it set up, he'll guarantee them a certain amount of monthly recurring revenue, or we'll pay for it. So we just believe in the strategy the way it's configured, and we're going to continue to do it this way.
So now I got to know what's this guarantee, the details of it.
I don't want to butcher this, it's Jim's thing, but he called it the MRR guarantee, and it effectively says that if you use our coverage extension information, you go to your customers and say, hey, we need this visibility because there's a lot of risk out there, and you onboard them the way that we recommend you onboard them, that you'll have a high enough take rate that we can guarantee the revenue. So as an example, let's say you have 1,000 users under management, and you use our methodology, we effectively say we'll guarantee you $1,500 in MRR added in the first 60 days, or we'll cover the cost of the product for that time.
That's really awesome.
Basically, he said, I'll give you $1,000 if I'm wrong. He's making bets, which is kind of neat because, again, we've had over 60 MSPs try this and we haven't had to pay anybody yet. So we're going to keep at it.
Good. Very good. Now, we've got a few more minutes left. You don't have anything else to show us, right?
I don't think so. I think it's not an overly complex product. If you guys have any specific questions about like our APIs or webhooks or the PSA support or customization, I'm happy to answer them. But sure. I mean, I could spend the next 2 hours if I just poked around and guessed at what they want to see.
No problem. I do have a couple more questions I want to go through. But before we do that, you have a special offer for those that are in attendance.
I do. I know you beat me up on it. Now I don't remember what it was. Can you?
Yeah. So you said if they sign up anytime, this month, next month, you won't bill them until March 31st.
No, that's right. Yeah, that one actually is the sooner you guys want to try this out, get in the trial, see if this will fit for your clients. I'll basically give you time to monetize it before you pay for it. So yeah, it's the 9th. You could get the next 7 weeks for free if you wanted to take a look, take the time to set it up. And if you say, yeah, this is a fit, you still won't get billed until the end of next month.
That's awesome. And it's only a 1-year commit. You can do a 3-year if you want to save some more money. But
or you can start the call by saying, don't say the number 3, and we won't.
Yeah. They're not going to twist your arm into it. All right. So let's go on to the next question I see here. So I know you touched on this, but we didn't talk pricing. So for the MSPs that don't have 500 endpoints, maybe they're a member of the tech tribe, what are the costs? It sounds like they're going through a third party to purchase it.
So there's a couple, and I wanted to suggest those guys because they tend to be really good at helping you guys leverage it on smaller customer sets and do the work. But that's not the only way to do it. That being said, and this is just us being our level best to be friendly in the channel, I don't have a published thing that I can share for you guys that are below 500 endpoints, but we will work with you. We do have options. It's just not something that we've been exceptionally public about. So don't let that discourage you from coming and talking to us. We'll find a way to make it fit. But our pricing table starts with 500 included.
Perfect. The next question I see here, can you pull info on missing EDR, MDR, XDR tools?
I'm going to have to try to interpret this one.
So he wants to know if you're able to pull the endpoint and see if it has antivirus, basically, I think is what I'm reading. Is that right, Matt? Let's assume that's right.
Okay. We can only pull the data that's being given to us via the RMM. So there is one aspect of that we can do, is that if you're using an XDR and it's supposed to be getting like ingesting data for some of these SaaS apps, we will see the OAuth connection. So if we don't see it, or you can quite literally run a report to see what third parties are connected, but we don't care about endpoints. So everything that we're monitoring on and focused on is access to SaaS applications. So if you're trying to see if you can rip and replace your EDR in favor of us, I wouldn't encourage it if you've got built infrastructure.
And I assume the same goes for if you're trying to rip and replace your RMM. You still need this, because this isn't going to get any information about the endpoint without the RMM, because there's no agent from SaaS Alerts. SaaS Alerts simply connects to everything, mostly with API calls.
Correct, and watches the data. So again, we care about the data, not the endpoint. And look, I actually do, and this might be, I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to say this or if it's like a faux pas. I do envision a time down the road where there's not going to be a need for an RMM for some clients, because everything they do in-house and handle and manage is bring your own device and housed in SharePoint. So why do you care what they do on their device as long as everything that you're responsible for managing is sitting in a SaaS application? That's what we're really for. That's kind of where the world is now. But you guys can't give up on your endpoints. Don't do that. You do have a blind spot in the SaaS apps, and that's where we wanted to focus.
Well, I'm just making a quick banner because I failed to earlier. So you can get signed up by going to saasalerts.com. And if I recall correctly, there's a free trial button right on the top right of the screen, right?
There is, and I think in the registration thing, when you register for the free trial, I'm actually double checking myself. I think that you can mark down that you, no, it's in, okay. So promo code, we don't have one for this, but it's not a vetted field. We'll see whatever you type in there. If you want to make a note that channel program is the reason that you did it, we'll make sure that we apply that if you end up signing on with us, that you don't get billed to 331. So channel program or Steve or whatever you want to say, just remind us this is where we started.
Perfect. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for doing this, and thanks to Ben. He had to get going to his next meeting, but thanks to Ben as well. Thank him for me, Ryan.
Absolutely.
And one more question, and then we'll call it. If we have an RMM tool on a system, you can alert us on missing security products on an endpoint.
That's Matt following up on the other piece of that question.
Oh,
so
okay.
it depends on what the RMM is showing us. That's going to vary wildly, like installs and uninstalls and things like that, or hit or miss.
So I guess I think the most important thing for us to say in regards to that, Matt, is I don't know that it matters if security products are on the endpoint or not, because what SaaS Alerts is going to use that endpoint information for is, hey, we see Billy just signed on to Microsoft 365 Outlook Online from Calgary, Alberta, but we see that his laptop is in New York City. So it's going to take that information and say, you know what, I've got 32% confidence that this person in Calgary is actually Billy, and it's going to make decisions based on should I kick them out or not, based on that
information. It's going to give you the option to educate and say, yeah, this is not behavior that I'm okay with. So we're not going to make the decision on your behalf. We're going to present the issue, and then you're going to tell SaaS Alerts in the future, if you see this behavior, this is how I want you to respond to it.
So hopefully that helps you understand a little bit better as to like why we're looking at. I say we, like I'm part of SaaS Alerts, but like why SaaS Alerts? Yeah. Hey, hey, if you want to send me some checks, go for it. But No, hopefully that helps you understand, like, why does SaaS Alert care about the endpoint? It's not necessarily that they're looking at every single aspect of the endpoint as much as they just want to correlate all of that user behavior data, as much user behavior data as they can, so they can give you a confidence score on how much do they believe that this is actually the user in question, so that way you can shut things down as needed. Hey, look at that.
Thanks, Matt.
Cool. Well, hey, it is 1 o'clock. Ryan, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate you coming on here. I learned a lot. And I think they did too. And thank you again for the special deal. No payments for 7 weeks is awesome. And everyone, you have yourselves a great weekend. And I will see you guys next week when we talk about Titan HQ at our next demo days.
Perfect. Matt, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Take care.